I kind of feel like it's strike fighter ball here, and I'm going to ask if VFA 87's here. Go ahead. Give it one more. Apparently the war party is in the house. All right, good afternoon and welcome. One quick public service announcement before we begin. For those who are going to ask questions, and this applies for the rest of the time, please, when you step up to the mic, hold the mic close so the entire audience can hear you. Good afternoon and welcome to what promises to be one of the more entertaining panels of this year's symposium. For those who weren't in attendance yesterday, I'm Captain Kevin McLaughlin, President of the TAILHOOK Association, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce the moderator for today's panel. Partly because I've known him since he was a fledgling JO in the Top Hatters, but mostly because he has the distinct pleasure to introduce our next generation of warriors who have literally been there and done that. Scoring the first kill of an enemy aircraft since January of 1991. To say that I am jealous of these gentlemen is probably the understatement of the century. As previously mentioned, Commander Andrew Grand Mariner started his career with the Top Hatters of VFA 14. A Top Gun graduate, he was assigned to Strike Fighter Weapons School Pacific before doing his training officer tour in VFA 27 in Japan. Following a successful department head tour with VFA 192, Grand went off to the Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island before he screened. During his command tour with VFA 105, Grand deployed on the USS Eisenhower in support of Operation Inherent Resolve, where he became quite familiar with the AOR and the ROE, which we're going to discuss today. Grand subsequently assumed command of the Navy Fighter Weapons School earlier this year, where he continues to serve today. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome me in a warm round of applause for Commander Grand Mariner.
All right, Hook 17, welcome. Deputy, thank you for that rousing biography. So yeah, this is gonna take a little bit different tack this time than you're probably used to with the JO panel, because how can we pass up an opportunity to have these four guys talk to us about what happened relatively recently over in the AOR, where combat operations are still happening today. So with that, I'd like to introduce from my right, your left, we have Lieutenant Commander Jeff Jojo Kruger, who's the training officer at VFA 87, Lieutenant Commander Michael Mob Tremmel, who is a department head at VFA 87, and then to my left, Lieutenant Commander William Vieter Vulet, who was most recently the training officer at VFA 37, and Lieutenant Stephen Scotty P. Gasecki, who is a junior officer with VFA 37. And all four of these gentlemen were airborne the day that the Su-22 fitter was shot down. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mob to start the discussion.
Awesome. Thanks, sir. Sounds like you guys can hear me in the back. The first thing I want to kick it off with is that this doesn't escape me, and it's extremely surreal to be sitting here in this environment. And couldn't have done it at all that day, that mission, without the guy sitting next to me, JoJo, and then these guys that were airborne as well. So absolute team effort, to include all the coordination that went on with the Air Force the entire time we were in the AOR, and that was mostly done by our training O's, two of which are sitting up here today. So just massive amount of coordination, and the amount of learning that we did pre-cruise, and then more learning than I've ever done in a cruise before, this being my third cruise. Other big things to drive home, and currently kind of keeping up with operations, the environment in country right now is extremely dynamic, both in the air-to-air and air-to-ground region, and that's why we needed these guys to keep training us every day, day in and day out, and just kind of teaching those roles. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to JoJo so he can talk to you guys about a little bit of the build-up to where we were that day on 18 June.
All right. All right, guys, kind of a big picture. I'll give you a little bit of background to how we got to that day. And help maybe fill in some gaps in knowledge for those that are still in the service that have been able to see kind of the debrief, and then help kind of provide really what our mindset was that day that we walked on. So big takeaways, we walked on a CAS mission that day, both Mob and I, it's Freedom 3334, and then Vieter and Scotty P is Freedom 4344. So that was a CAS mission on about 4 months into deployment, and it was not our first air-to-air exposure. So that's kind of the first thing to take away, is that although we were on a CAS mission, this was not the first time we were thinking about air-to-air. Rather, there was months of events that prepared us for that in the AOR as well as on our workup. Kind of the key background information is, again, our mission out there was to, and still is, to attack ISIS, and then protect the friendly forces that are operating in the AOR. So those two missions are fundamentally kind of tied together, and it's something that through very clear commander's guidance. I think CAG would probably say some of the clearest that he's seen to the air crew that helped us get to where we were. So with the understanding that the workup syllabus and everything that brought us up to deployment was largely standard with some compression that they could obviously talk about a little bit more. I think the big takeaway as a training level is that we just deployed as any other training goes with a good turnover from CAG 3. And we knew that our primary mission set out in the AOR would likely be close air support, as well as some deliberate strikes and air interdiction missions that were definitely new for us, but we definitely had exposure to in the training syllabus. And it was for about a couple months that we were largely executing mostly what the previous air wings had. And then a few escalation events started occurring in the AOR that required the air wing to take on more of a DCA or air-to-air mindset than what had previously been done in that AOR as well as in the Navy in some time. So reaching back to not only Top Gun, the weapons schools, and the resident knowledge of some of the older gentlemen in the air wing to basically bring in an understanding of where we needed to go, how we needed to prepare. And from that point, there's basically 3 scenarios that built up to the knowledge base to that day. And the key takeaway is on the day of the mission, again, I said we launched on a CAS mission, but we had a very clear understanding of what the ROE was, as well as how to protect a dynamically maneuver or a dynamic friendly position. In other words, if there was individuals on the ground, we knew that in order to effectively protect them from a potential third-party attack on them, the key takeaways is we had to know exactly where they were, who they were, and then work a team effort to coordinate with not only potentially the individuals on the ground, as well as TAC C2, as well as inherent in our own elements in order to get the job done. And I think that was one of our biggest takeaways in the lead up to this event was that multi-role teamwork effort that would need to be done in order to effectively execute the mission as it was.
Tight. So I'll just jump right into day of ops. At that point in time, it'd be 18 June. We are the second wave of the day. We don't find out till Veter and Scotty P see us in the mass brief that everyone's kind of heading to the same place that day to Raqqa. At that point in time, the AOR was pretty hot in that general vicinity, and a lot of guys were dropping bombs. So our number one priority that day was cutting Veter and his wingman out of the stack and making sure we can employ before them. So we briefed to success there, trying to launch early, talking to the yellow shirts, getting off the deck first, making sure we hit the tanker early. Anything we could to cut those guys out of the stack, number one priority. So with that, again, kind of a senior flight for us. Most of the time, kind of senior, junior was most of what our flights were. It just worked out that day. As everyone knows, you can try and put an A team out there if you want to call it that, but that doesn't last, and you've got to get back to just normal ops where the youngest JO is going to be in the mix there. So you got to train everyone up to that level. We'll take off in the Eastern Med. Anyone who hasn't flown ops from the Eastern Med, it's fantastic. The weather's great and clear for us that day. JoJo will take off first and start an easy, lazy right-hand turn, and we'll go south of Cyprus from there with myself joining up. We both took a cup of coffee as well, so we'll sip on some coffee at 22,000 feet inbound to the AOR at that point in time. Again, we briefed to CAS, and that was going to be our mission that day, so we felt like it would be kind of in our wheelhouse what we were doing, but we also had already trained to all the air-to-air contingencies we might have, and we had talked about that pre-flight. And then just standard procedures for us working our way through the northern route into country. That's when Veter will come up our aux. We're already using call signs right now, so we were Freedom 3334 and Freedom 4344. As you guys can hear, that's a mouthful, which once you start losing brainstem power, it's just easier to go back to call signs. So with that, I'll kick it over to Veter. He'll come up our attack and say, hey guys, things are starting to heat up, and we all need to switch up the same voice alpha.
Yeah, so Scotty P and I were about 60 miles behind these guys when the Mighty Charles working all the kinks on deck before taking off, as usual. So we were about 60 miles behind them, and listening on voice alpha to my skipper, Peterman Shoemaker. He's in country in Raqqa before us, and we can hear that already the situation's getting a little more heated on the ground with some friendly forces getting a little closer to some of Syrian forces there. So based on that, I just get JoJo and Mob there on the radio and let them know, hey, you should monitor voice alpha to kind of monitor the situation, see what's going on. As we head into country, we get there before those guys, so we're at the bottom of the stack now. The JTAC is pretty aggressive, wanting to get some employment going right away. So we're in a full cast mindset at this point. It's been the events that have been going on are purely on the ground, and they're expecting us to potentially step in if need be for self-defense reason at this point as required, and basically have us teed up with some potential lines. So we're just monitoring the situation, seeing what's going on overhead the situation. As this happens, based on all the different factions in play in that area, the air-to-air picture starts to get a little more busy. So what we'll see is Russian assets show up first and kind of start to circle overhead. So we're in a cast mindset, in a stack, it's typical saving gas, going maxi in that cast stack, and now we have a Russian asset overhead us that we're trying to keep a track of. And from there, basically, Mob kind of take, volunteers, if you will, to keep track of this guy based on having issues, actually, within his jet. So he'll just kind of start keeping track of this guy and see what's going on. And again, it's very professional interaction at this point between all the Russian assets and ourselves throughout the whole theater. Everything's been really professional. And from that point where we're, again, talking to the JTAC and just talking to each other on voice alpha, no real air-to-air interaction with any kind of a C2 entity at this point is when Mob will pick up a contact on his radar.
Cool. Back over to me. Just to clear some things up, I think Veter got confused with all his time at Wharton recently. We had a tanker fallout, so our tanker will have to go hit a different tanker. That's why we end up second in the stack. Otherwise, our game plan would have worked perfectly.
Is that an excuse?
We were about 70 miles in front of you.
We would have flown the brief perfectly and executed. Second thing, he did get the point right. We had 4 assets there looking at the same target area, and just as luck would have it, my FLIR will jam up for a second, go through a bit. So I will offer my services again. We're all just keeping visual track of that Russian asset overhead. I'll just extend out at that point in time in air-to-air master mode while these guys are using air-to-ground master mode to continue to monitor the situation on the ground. And that's when I'll pick up a unknown aircraft approaching from the south. Anything up to that point we missed?
Oh.
Great. So from that point in time, everyone knows we have Air Force assets in there with, I'll make a declare call, and we'll get that Air Force asset unknown. They'll come back with different conflicting information based on what that track would be, and then they kind of work their way down to the fact that it is a Syrian aircraft. I will, at that point in time, based on the learning that we had, crews in the last 10 days especially, knowing that as these things get more and more dynamic, the best thing you can do is go down and make that VID happen. So just leaving our block there in the 20 to 24 block, go ahead and descend down. That's kind of the first call, and where, if anyone's seen the tapes, that's where the call sign switch is going to happen, because I'll say Freedom 3-3 is descending to make this VID on voice alpha, and Veter will throw it out Freedom Who, and then it's Veter and Mob's descending to make the ID happen, and then it's going on from there. Mob, JoJo, Veter, and Scotty P's doing his job up there, being high cover.
I don't think there was a call sign
coffee.
on that call. And I think the other kind of key point there Mob alluded to is that as soon as we found this questionable aircraft that we knew could be a factor, one of the first things that Mob did was recognize that we need to start task shedding. As anybody out there flying knows, you can have 3 radios, but you're not going to talk on 3 radios and listen on 3 radios all at the same time. So something that we definitely learned as an air wing and really kind of practiced there was, hey, how are we going to split these tasks up? And so very quickly it became the comm plan from that point forward is basically Mob's up TAC C2, and me and him are up the same aux. All four of us are up the same J voice. And then I'm working with the JTAC. Vitor, you're still at the JTAC freak, right? As well as Scotty P. So we basically started to say we split our pry freak, and now we're starting to work different pry plans to kind of accomplish everything that needs to be done for the ROE, as well as effectively kind of protect them, but also a lot of coordination, very, very comm intensive.
Yeah, absolutely. JoJo hit on it. I will switch off the pry freak, and this is where everyone knows you need a great wingman out there, and that's what he was for us that day. He will talk to the guys on the ground and kind of get his arms around the situation, find out exactly where that forward line of troops is, anchor that, and kind of use our onboard combat systems as well as voice comm to me to make sure I understood how close that this Syrian aircraft was to coalition forces. JoJo mentioned it in the beginning. The whole mission out there that day was to go defeat ISIS, annihilate ISIS. That's our mission. So as quickly as we can get back to that mission, that was our goal that day, and get back to that primary mission of close air support. It won't transpire that way, as everyone knows at that point in time. But again, at any point in time this would have de-escalated, then that would have been just fine with us, and that we can go back and get mission success, continuing to drop bombs on ISIS. Proceed to the south, execute the VID, looking at the combat systems that JoJo's putting out for me with good transmit designate, if everyone's familiar. And he's putting out good comm for us as far as how far away this track is to our friendly forces. At that point in time, the aircraft, again, will be ID'd. I will make a visual identification with a single Su-22 fitter, put that on the radio for TAC C2, and now I'm just kind of monitoring his position and comparing that to the rules of engagement, which we won't get into the very specifics right now, just for operational security. He'll proceed north overhead, and at the same point in time, we'll task Shed down to TAC C2 to put out numerous guard calls on every radio they possibly have. So JoJo mentioned 3 radios, now we got guard talking on top of that as well. So just tough to get a lot of information through, which goes back to that training piece of, hey, you might have to do this semi-calm out. We need people to be in the correct place at the correct time. I can't be driving you around like yellow gear on aux. And that's what happened to that day, at least. Everyone was in the correct place at the correct time to make this happen. Assessing that nose position, we're putting out these guard calls as well, assessing his position to friendly forces. At this point in time, great wingman as well, as he's proceeding closer to friendly forces. Hey man, we need to execute a headbutt, which at this point in time is just going to be passing overhead closely to the aircraft and putting out flares. So again, that second warning on top of the guard calls, and we'll execute 3 of those as well. Like I said, at any point in time, if this aircraft would head south and work his way out of the situation, that would be fine with us, and we can go back to executing CAS. After the third one, this is probably where, if anyone's seen the tape, it kind of picks up with the cut. After that third one, he will proceed to release ordnance, execute a dive and release ordnance in proximity of friendly forces. 2 weapons will come off the aircraft. He'll execute a climb at that point in time, and I'll swing the master arm, fire 1 by AIM-9X. It goes for all the aviators in the room. It'll come off the rails quick, like normally, which I'll get to here in a second to make sure that we practice shooting air-to-air missiles. It'll come off like it had before in a previous missile shoot that I'd executed as a JO, and kind of go in there, and I lose the smoke trail, and I have no idea kind of what happened to the missile at that point in time. So as we've been taught, try something different, and then just select the AIM-120 at that point in time. AIM-120 will do its job for all the guys also as aviators there. It takes a long time for the cheek station, so make sure you think about that with trigger discipline and holding it down. Long time for that weapon to come off, and it will explode, impact the backside of the aircraft, and the aircraft will pitch right and down, and the pilot will jump out and left in his ejection seat. To my previous point, myself and McD, wherever he is, we're on a missile shoot when we were JOs, and I was back in BFA 31. Both shot a drone off of the coast of Oceania, and both watched the weapons impact, and both continued straight into the cloud of debris, almost hitting it. So we realized that was a bad idea and both executed a quick break turn away from that. Fast forward all these years later, didn't forget that, see the impact of that weapon and execute a quick turn to the left and kind of watch the ejection seat go down the right-hand side of my canopy. I'll kind of go on the egress, but Veter at that point in time will descend out of that high holding stack and starts jumping into that wingman roll close. Wingman, he's called something a loose deuce, which I think is a 1960-70, so I'll have to get tightened up on that later. But Veter, if you could explain the loose deuce to everyone.
It's all you.
Specifically, please.
Specifically, with ranges.
No, I think a good point to bring up here is that it'll be kind of non-standard. Obviously, JoJo and Mob are, they're the flight together, but the stack going into this is basically Freedom 4-3, so myself at the bottom of the stack, Scotty P just on top of me, then Mob, then JoJo, and then based on the kind of air-to-air mindset led Mob to go down, and first of all, he picked up that contact, led him to go down and execute the VID, and then basically from there, I'm the next guy towards the bottom of the stack. So I'll basically, as soon as basically I get reasonable assurance that this is Syrian contact, I'll basically jump in right in and pick up visual of both Mob and that's here in the Su-22, and basically join in for support, knowing that this can become a little more exciting situation at this point.
Again, kind of entrail me, so Veter will see the canopy deploy, big white canopy with
Yeah, actually pretty similar to ours, green, orange, white pattern. They may have the same supplier, I don't know.
Could be one of these contractors out in the audience today. So now we talked about guard calls as well, so you have an ELT going off as well to kind of compound all the communications at that point in time. Hadn't escaped us as well, and Veter will put out good comm kind of right prior to weapons impact that we have descended now into multiple surface-to-air WESs. So at this point in time, highly defensive situation, realize that from the Freedom 3-3 roll, elect to sell jet. My ordnance works is published and start working our way out of country kind of as we're not in the greatest place on earth right now to include the Russian asset that's overhead as well. So start working our way out of country, and we kind of hit on it as Veter just takes this wingman role. No one told him to do that, but he knows it's kind of what we need to do with all the training we did pre-cruise. He'll be there, and then we flow pretty quickly into mutual support in for lack of a better term, it kind of looks like a wall extended out to the south and kind of pick up division tactics on the way out. I will throw out an RWR inventory, and that'll get heard. I put that out on AUX actually, and JoJo will have the great essay to put it out on Voice Alpha for all of us, and that kind of cages everybody that we are absolutely operating as a division at this point in time. I would like to state at this point in time as well, Veter will key the mic and ask where Scotty P is, because he realizes he actually came out with a different wingman than us two, and Scotty P is in defensive combat spread on his right-hand side. Yeah. Yes.
It was actually the left.
Left-hand side. Thank you. Thank you.
But I believe it was a Scotty P, where are you?
He was not in the loose deuce. He was exactly where he should be. And, right? That's what we train to, and can't say enough about it, man. It's awesome. Awesome. You want to anything else you want to say for the egress without getting into real specific?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of really emphasize the point that, it depends on how you train, but man, there was this no kidding excellent opportunity that we had where the 3-star CFAC came out to the aircraft carrier not too many days prior to this and was very clear, talking directly to the air crew, saying, my guidance, any questions on the ROE, and I have your back. And emphasizing the point that you have to be able to go out there and operate autonomously within the guidance of the commander's guidance. So very clear commander's guidance, and then very clear understanding that you have a big responsibility out there, and your decisions have strategic implications. So make sure you don't take those decisions lightly, but it should not be, it cannot be emphasized enough that, for Mob to recognize what happened and that it was his job at that moment to execute the ROE, it's no small feat to say that I'm gonna be the first guy to arm this jet up and squeeze the trigger, because that's what needs to happen right now in a long time. So, I think that could not have been made possible without our entire command environment from from the COs all the way through CAG Admiral and all the way up through the CFAC. So that moment in time that occurred, and I can tell you honestly, as being kind of over the friendlies, stacked up high and rolling up on a wing and looking at the wreckage down below us was it was definitely it was a different feeling, and we knew right at that moment there was a lot of questions regarding the threats. There's a lot of threats out there. We won't go into specifics, but we very quickly were in a position that we had to make some decisions pretty quickly, and I thought that that the training and the commander's guidance that we got at that point was a big deal.
Cool. Other things I'll mention on the egress, numerous calls just for switchology, making sure we're safe up at this point in time. We'll have multiple civilian traffic between us and our next tanker, so lots of comm between the four of us, making sure that we continue to do ROE as we egress, so making sure we can ID if we can on board, and just making our way through there. Fantastic job by the Air Force. Hook us up with a KC-10 right there. I think IBM, you guys were on it, and they will kindly move out of the way for us or get enough gas at least to make it to their next vol and keep it going. So we will work our way through. I will just tattoo that basket as fast as possible. Pretty mean. And that'll work. At that point in time, Freedom 3, 3, 3, 4, with my aircraft kind of looking like a 106 jet now with just 19X on a wing, elect to head home. So we'll work that scenario and kind of work with the TAILHOOK as well and get approval to RTB to the ship. I'm going to kick it over to Viter, because these guys will not. Classic naval aviation, we're just going to keep fighting. There's no reason to go home if we still have ordnance on the jet. Viter.
Yeah, I'll go real quick here so we have time to take questions as well. But one more quick 30 seconds on the ROE, just highlighting again how important it was and how dynamic it was, really. So throughout our cruise, we lived through several pretty big events. Obviously, TLAM strikes in Syria happened while we were out there. Before this shoot down, there was a drone shoot down in a different area. So a very dynamic environment in terms of the ROE. Daily changes to that ROE that had to be communicated down to really, to the top level, but all the way down to the air crew. It was very important to get that communication piece and that understanding from a daily perspective of how the ROE was moving and what the implications were behind that ROE. So yeah, we'll get to the tanker. Now we're still full up on ordnance. Scotty P and I haven't yet employed. Getting a little jealous at this point. So I just kind of talking to the. We're also a little excited. So we'll get the tanker on the. We feel like we have to tell somebody what had just happened. So we get the tanker on the secure comm and let them know what happened. And from there, they give us basically new tasking. So we quickly decide that we're basically the best fit, and we'll push to Mosul. And so we've been operating in Raqqa in Syria, which a specific set of ROE for CAS, and now moving to Mosul with a slightly different set of ROE for CAS. And now basically we're providing a vol of straight up CAS in Mosul. And unfortunately, my bomb will go hung in lock, but Scotty P will get to drop that night. So, the flight started as expecting to be a CAS mission. We fortunate, I guess, to get into a little bit of air-to-air and go right back into CAS. So very dynamic environment, executing multiple missions throughout the span of a couple hours.
Just so everyone doesn't yell at this dirty hinge for stealing the JO panel. Yeah. Scotty P, can you tell us about kind of just switching mindsets, man, honestly? And because I know I was operating on brainstem power. JoJo and I talked about it numerous times. Like, it's just tough to do that, and you switch roles right into air to ground.
Yeah, the hardest part for me was recaging after seeing the wreckage, and then just trying to figure out how I'm going to get myself settled back in. That KC-10 was critical in that, I would say. just having a nice fluffy basket just to calm myself down. Nothing better than that. Had it been a KC-135, I probably would have ripped my probe off. After that, settling down, everybody's kind of chattering on Ox about what just happened, and it kind of soothed it a little bit more when we got back into the normal CAS operations, talking with the JTAC. I think talking with the JTAC is what calmed me down the most, and just getting back into that wheel and executing from there.
Good stuff, man. So, greatest part of naval aviation, right? Coming back to the boat as well. Mission's not over yet. We'll both sections will work their way out of country. A little bit of issues, a little bit of differences, but we'll all make it back to the ship. And then
I think a lot of one wires.
there was a lot. Veter tagged one wire pretty hard, and
We got no graded.
I think you got
I
no graded.
did.
Cinder, I think yes.
I got it as well.
Oh, there's a double no grade.
What
and,
wire do you hit? I forget.
I will smash the ace pretty hard for the underline OK fitter killer one. So
I'll get told to extend off the 180 because he's like 45 seconds in the group.
somewhere between the .98 aileron roll overhead the ship and the shit hot brake, I got a little long in the groove, and slightly below what I would like to be on the ball as far as the fuel number, but I wasn't skipping the one wire there. Again, just love this business, and here's one of the many reasons why. Taxi out of the LA, no one's there, not no one, but the first we had the Go just launched. There wasn't a lot of people around. The show goes on, right? Taxi out, there is a lot of AOs there. Everyone's pretty excited, as they should be. Come down, shake a few hands, and then I remember it was AO2 and I just kind of staring at each other. He's like, "Okay, sir. All right. Well, you cell-jetted all this ordnance, so we have to load it up. It's going in country in 1 hour." And that was it. Kind of pushed me out of the way, and the show went on. Went downstairs and was reminded that I was Air Wing Safety Duty Officer, so I walked around and got everyone's safety reports. It was amazing. It really cut down on all that nitnoid stuff. No one really had a lot of that day, which was good. It's a short report for DCAG. I missed anything there? And then standard stuff, standard debrief stuff for all the aviators in the room, kind of working our way through. To JoJo's point, the chain of command told us the entire time, follow the ROE, follow the spins, and we're going to back you up. That happened for everybody in this room that was in CAG 8 for the air-to-surface regime, and it was no different in the air-to-air regime when we needed to execute the ROE spins. Skipper, CAG, Admiral Weitzel, and then the whole way on up to CFAC. Had a chance to talk to him. You know, I kind of iterated those things as well, and how important it was to us as aviators for him to come out and actually put eyeball to eyeball is what he voiced that as for the support. Anything else before we kick it off?
No.
Yeah. Anything else, Graham? All right, so I think we have at least 25 minutes for questions, and I know I've at least stuck 3 or 4 questions in this audience, mostly for Scotty P, and whether he was going to shoot an AIM-120 into the wreckage.
The only thing to remember for the questions, please try to keep them unclassified. Thank you.
There's no questions.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I can't see you. There's too much of a shine off your head, sir. If you could state your name.
Just for the record, the average GPA was a 5.0, and there were 2 no counts.
Oh, nice. CAG paddles, ladies and gentlemen, CAG paddles. Thank you. I appreciate that. That was just to set the record straight. Anyone else around the room? Yes, sir.
Awesome, gentlemen. Thank you so much. Non-aviator, so please pardon my naivety, but with regard to C2, AWACS and Hawkeyes, and yet you actually secured the initial contact as unknown. Could you just talk a little bit about what in that joint coalition force, whether there was other C2 and a priori knowledge that something might come from someplace and be looking there and et cetera?
Yeah, certainly. As everyone knows, large AOR, working numerous assets in there, trying to keep the air-to-air picture straight and forward. And C2 every day works fantastic things for us as far as tankers and tasking and making sure we're being efficient with the assets that are airborne to put those things down range. So that was that's the 95 to 99% solution of what they're executing every day, as well as trying to monitor all these air-to-air tracks that are out there. Just kind of putting that whole piece together, we'll get there where it is, just because, again, this is what we would say is non-standard for what we'd seen. So I think it caught them a little bit by surprise, kind of the way those aircraft were operating. But they did eventually we got the correct assessment for that aircraft. Again, things we had learned on cruise, though, make sure you just go down there and execute a VID if you needed to make sure there's no question in the cockpit whatsoever. Does that answer your question, sir? Do you answer that? Crickets. Question? Anyone?
You know, I think as a one thing I'll just bring up really fast too, to kind of along those lines, is just that you know, we harp a lot on training, and you know, as a training officer, obviously kind of near and dear, but you know, in this mission there was a lot of different, I guess you could say, different mission sets that came up, and the big thing I would throw out there is the fact that you know, we always hear it all the time. I remember being at Top Gun, you hear all the MiG killers, the guys from Vietnam come up and talk about, hey, the importance of section engaged maneuvering, you know, that visual maneuvering, all that stuff. You know, we train it, everything's gonna be 100 miles away, but you know, out there real time, it's 100% those fundamentals. So those can never fade away, no matter what the technology is.
Sir?
How you doing? Ernesto Howard, Drock International. The question I have, kind of closing out what you guys did with the JTACs on the ground. So obviously there's the air-to-air picture going on. How did you guys step away from that at the time? So kind of just, can you walk us through that small piece?
Yeah. So during the engagement, what happened is, honestly, the radio piece, the comm piece was a huge deal, as we alluded to. Probably could have been managed a little bit better on my part. Specifically, I'll stay up the JTAC on Pry. So we'll end up with 3 guys up on the JTAC frequency still on Pry, and then mobs on the C2 frequency at that point during the engagement. Post the engagement, at that point, the situation on the grounds actually kind of has not been progressing for at least an hour or so. It's pretty stale. So based on, you know, all the, you know, potential threats out there, the decision was initially made to egress. We'll communicate with the JTAC what's going on, and he basically did not have any issues with that. If that's answering your question, he'll just, you know, kind of roger up. We'll let him know we just had an engagement against a Syrian aircraft, and that we're egressing at that point, and no basically qualms from his perspective.
Anything else on that? Oh. Sir?
I'll handle it. I'm call sign Zygote. I was the Squadron AI in VFA 87 about 30 years ago. I'm now the Deputy Editor-in-Chief of Proceedings Magazine. What you guys just briefed, I would love to see you write it up. We'll get it published in Proceedings, so see me afterwards, because this story needs to be out to the rest of the Navy. Great story, thanks.
You got it, sir. And then cheap plug, the Nautic Journal articles on the desk out there as well for anyone with that access. Get that out. But great point, sir.
Yeah, just real quick. I'm curious, you had your procedures to go through after the VID to basically thump him. You call
Yes,
it
sir.
head nut, whatever. And you did that 3 times. What's your sense that they know that means get out of here? You know, why did he keep trundling on and let you shoot him? That's the question.
Post weapons employment, is that what you mean, sir?
You know, even before, I mean, you're on guard, you're shouting at him, you're flying by him 3 times, pumping flares.
Yes, sir.
Is your sense that he knows that means that there's something bad going to happen
Yeah.
if he doesn't go away?
Unknown. He'll just kind of proceed on his mission, ambivalent to where I am, and then unable to execute a red air debrief. So I'd.
I mean,
So- In the middle.
Lieutenant Wald, call sign Hodor, E2 instructor at BT4. My question is, if you guys if you were the first ones to pick up sensor SA to the contact, were the ones to make the ID, were the ones to witness the hostile act, and make the hostile declaration, who was controlling you guys and what did they provide to that intercept?
So that's loaded. That's loaded.
Yeah.
That's a hot loaded question.
So I think there was a C2 track. It just wasn't communicated to us. I think maybe a better way to put it.
Well, and again, I would cage that discussion with, we're on a cash mission on a pretty dynamic 2-9 lines. We weren't even up taxi 2. So mob switched up to taxi 2 based on finding this guy. So if we were on a dedicated DCA mission, then we would have had a dedicated asset already looking at that. And without going into specifics, those sort of things change back and forth a little bit in country based on the environment. So that specific day, there was not a dedicated DCA at that time. So a lot of those kind of those points for maybe a debrief point you'd say for taxi 2, it needs to be caged based on the scenario. Anything else there, Mob?
I just want to throw this in that if let's say you come up with a range and you say, hey, taxi 2, I need you to tell me about an aircraft within this range. The AOR right now is so dynamic that you're going to hear about it. You're going to hear about it a lot. So we just kind of make it the best we can of it at that point in time. We did a debrief with them. They provided me what we did in task shedding. The guard calls to those guys as well was huge for us. So they really came through for me at that point in time. It's a good question, though. Does it answer it, man?
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah. I think he's going to answer his phone.
Hey, Mob, Hoof here. You got a pretty cool piece of addition to our shared history sitting there in front of you that a lot of people in the room may not know what it is or where it's going. Why don't you explain that to them?
There's a wall. There's a glass wall between the fleet training building, Top Gun, and the hangar where the staff dresses and the class fighters. And it's got every Navy shoot down in it. And it has the block that you're looking here kind of building on that wall as we go year by year. So that was given to me by the staff, Vespa and the gang, and Skipper Grand just this week as well. So I'll be carrying it around the rest of TAILHOOK. And I heard if you're the last person to touch it, you're the next person to get an air-to-air kill. And there's a lot of room left on that wall to keep building. One point I'll point out there, and we're definitely focused on the guys in flight suits right now. But the thing that we've talked about, CAG and Skipper and I have talked about, is the fact that how many years have we been loading and unloading air-to-air ordnance, and for the one day that we're going to use it and it works. So just fantastic commitment by the sailors through all of our squadrons, uploading, downloading the ship as well, building these things and making sure they're 4.0, even though probably in their heads they know there's zero chance that these things are going to get launched. But they both worked. Sir.
Hey, Doug Denny, Boog. Busy to all of you. Question, one of you guys said earlier that you want to talk about the amount of missiles you shot prior to the shoot down, kind of from a training perspective. Really from the JO perspective, you did a great workup. You guys had a historic deployment in PGM deployments. What do you think going into that did you need more of to be more effective? As far as, let's just focus on PGMs and missiles.
I'm going to kick this to the training goes. I caught kind of the back end of the workup cycle. So I'll get Joe and then Peter.
Yeah, it's a NCEA, ordnance, air-to-air, air-to-surface. I think anybody that has done this business long enough knows that you can train, simulate all you want, but nothing replaces the real thing. Simulators are great in that they're making phenomenal advances in technology, but you can't really put a price on some of the lessons learned that you have from just physically doing it. So I'd say that would go across the board, both air-to-surface and air-to-air.
Yeah, like specifically from the Charlie perspective, one of the issues we had obviously is you can simulate JDAM in the jet, but it's just not the same thing. You don't have the exact same symbology, exact same options as you do when you're actually carrying, whether it's a CATM or a live weapon. So that was definitely a limiting factor. Just how much NCEA, how much we're able to captive carry, and for us specifically, captive carry a variety of weapons. So not just one GBU-38, for example, but a mix of different weapons. That was definitely a great limitation for us across the air wing, I think, at times.
Absolutely. Sir.
Gentlemen, thanks for being here. Discharge. First, I want to say thanks for being here. Veter, your hair looks incredible. This question's for Mob. Didn't you get treated with a real nice vacation after you executed this flight? Didn't you get off the boat pretty near after your landing?
Well, I got you talking about when I got sent to the KAOK because it was my time to be the department head at the KAOK, so I got sent as well to the KAOK. CFAC asked if that was punishment or a reward, and I told him that we go to the KAOK for R&R, and it's not a real deployment. Great question, though. Does that answer your question? Yes, sir.
You mentioned a Russian asset airborne at the same time. What was it and how did it react after you launched the AIM-120?
It's a very great question, sir. We'll have daily interactions with Russian aircraft, as anyone who's keeping up with the news knows, and professional interactions. This is just one of many that we had. It'll be a flanker, and he'll be overhead in the bandit block 30 to 34, and he will, as we egress and start to flow out of the downed aircrew position, he'll follow us for a period of time and then turn back overhead. The position is what it appears to be at that point. Anything else to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that from our perspective, yeah, it had been very routine to see them around, but it was a very non-standard day, so there was a lot of trust but verify going on during the way out.
Slightly answered this question. Anybody else? All right. Anything else? Parting shots? Got nothing, sir. Thanks, guys, for having us.
Well, as I promised, told you to be entertaining, especially with this guy, right? To say I dislike you is an understatement. But if that doesn't make you feel good about being a naval aviator and doing what we do, nothing is gonna. So thank you very much to JoJo Mob, Veter, and Scotty P. Thanks for Grant for moderating. I have time at 1:07. Please be back in your seats. Time 3.